This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. If this is your first time tuning in, then where you been? I mean, welcome. To our returning viewers, I'll make sure to take care of your punch cards after the show. Here's what we got for y'all tonight, folks. Let's talk a bit about the Winter Olympics unfolding in Beijing. We've seen some controversy before the games about some of China's policy actions, and there's been a bit of controversy during the games, like in women's figure skating. Let's get an update on some of that. Patrick Falk is in Beijing taking all of it in. Patrick, what have been some of the biggest issues we've seen lately?
Well, attentions were turned towards the case of Kamila Valieva on Monday after the Court of Arbitration for Sports decided not to reimpose a temporary suspension of the athlete, despite the fact she tested positive for a banned substance. Now, Valieva, remember, tested positive at the Russian National Championships, which took place on December 25th. But that result didn't come out until February 8th, the day after she helped the ROC win gold in the team figure skating event at the Beijing Winter Olympic Games. It's still not clear why that result took such a long time to get confirmed, but CAS said that that wasn't Valieva's fault and said that it gave her insufficient time to mount a legal defense of the case. The decision by CAS has prompted an outcry in several quarters. The US Olympic and Paralympic Committee said it was disappointed in the ruling and said that athletes deserve to know that they were competing on a level playing field. WADA also weighed in and warned that it potentially creates a situation where the IOC might have to award medals to athletes, but then possibly have to take them back depending on how the investigation pans out. It also said that it was an embarrassing situation. Away from the controversy on the ice, competition got underway as normal. In other events, after a weekend that was blighted by difficult weather conditions, there had been a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion and criticism directed towards China in particular over hosting the games in a region that suffers from water scarcity. But there was none of that over the weekend. So there was heavy snowfall across Beijing and the northern Hebei province as well. It hampered many athletes during competition and forced some events to be rescheduled because of the heavy snowfall as well.
All right, much appreciated, Patrick. Countries usually consider hosting the Olympics a great honor. It's a golden opportunity to showcase your country on the world stage and promote tourism and influence people in other countries. But it can also be a costly and sometimes even risky challenge. We're seeing all of that on display this month as the Winter Olympics unfold in Beijing. It's the second time China is hosting, having hosted the Summer Olympics in Beijing in 2008. Those games were a phenomenal success for China, which made a profit of over $140 million from hosting the games. Ian Johnson, a China expert at the Council on Foreign Relations, points out those games were a big step for China's soft power to influence people at home and abroad.
Events like the Olympics are really important to the government in Beijing because you have to remember that the Communist Party didn't come to power through elections. Their claim to legitimacy is that they can deliver prosperity to Chinese people, which they've by and large been doing over the past few decades, making China wealthier and wealthier, but also in giving China prestige on the international stage.
Just like in 2008, hosting the Olympics is serving as a chance for China to showcase its progress to the world, but it's a very different world and a very different China now.
It certainly began to change after the Olympics. The person who would go on to win the Nobel Peace Prize, Liu Xiaobo, was picked up later that year. And there were, the next year or so, 2010, they began to crack down on the internet.
When China first hosted the games, it was a developing economic power on the rise. The international community had hoped that bringing China into the fold could change its path and maybe lead to a move in the direction of democracy, with China signaling an openness to allowing some democratic freedoms. And while China faced accusations of human rights violations against dissidents and Tibetan separatists, those concerns didn't stop world leaders from attending the games. China has since become a global economic power. Depending on which economic metric you use, it's either near the US or surpassing it as the world's largest economy. And President Xi Jinping has consolidated power and moved China in a more authoritarian direction since taking power in 2013. Starting in 2019, China cracked down on pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, and consolidated power over it. The former British colony was supposed to maintain full autonomy until 2047, 50 years after it was passed to Chinese control. But in 2020, China imposed a new national security law that effectively makes dissent illegal and removes most of the unique protections on civil rights that Hong Kong residents had. Secondly, under President Xi, China has also targeted people of other ethnicities, including Tibetans, Mongolians, and perhaps most notably, the mostly Muslim Uyghurs living in the northwestern province of Xinjiang. Over 1 million people, mostly Uyghurs, are being held in secretive internment camps that have allegedly been sites of rape, abuse, torture, and killings.
To put it simply, we're facing genocide, and this is something that, a lot of experts, international lawyers have also agreed on. It's kind of become this open-air prison where really every single movement of Uyghur people and other Turkic people are being monitored, even in the privacy of their homes, where Chinese officials are sent into their homes to monitor every single aspect of their lives.
Zumradai Erkin is a human rights advocate working with the World Uyghur Congress. She hasn't seen some of her family for years because of the limitations placed by the Chinese government, and she worries the decision to have China host the games again could lead to more repression in the future.
I think in this context, for the International Olympic Committee to not even consider taking into account the human rights record of the host country is a decision that should be really condemned by the wider international community. Countries like China are going to use this as an opportunity to basically it's a propaganda show for them, for the Chinese government.
In early 2021, the Trump administration issued a formal determination that China committed genocide and crimes against humanity against the Uyghurs. The Biden administration has agreed, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken also describing China's actions against Uyghurs as genocide. A group of countries, including the US, UK, Canada, and Australia, did not send officials as part of a diplomatic boycott tied to China's treatment of Uyghurs. China denies all allegations of human rights abuses in the camps and had a Uyghur athlete participate in the torch lighting at the opening ceremonies, a move which has upset Uyghur rights advocates. And finally, China has also faced international criticism for its handling of the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was first detected in the Chinese city of Wuhan. All of this has put pressure on China to deliver a successful games without major logistical or political issues popping up. Athletes have had to endure long and strict lockdowns after arriving as a part of China's zero COVID strategy. And there's been a bit of, shall we say, rough sledding for these games. The games were supposed to have full crowds, but crowds have been strictly limited after Beijing spotted its first case of the Omicron variant last month. And countries have been worried about potential surveillance of their athletes. The FBI told American Olympians to leave their cell phones at home and use a burner instead due to surveillance concerns. And the Committee to Protect Journalists issued a similar warning to reporters covering the games from Beijing.